room was silent when David called his son to the bed. Not the silence of peace, the silence of a man who knows that what he is about to say must be said now, because there will be no tomorrow in which to say it. King David of Israel, dying. The body that had killed Goliath, that had danced before the ark until his robes flew up and scandalized the palace, that had survived a son's coup attempt and 30 years of war and too many betrayals to count. That body was ending, and Solomon was standing beside the bed, waiting. What does a dying king give his son in his final hours? David had an army, a treasury, an alliance network spanning every nation between Egypt and Babylon. He gave Solomon none of those. He gave him 7 sentences that produced the wisest, wealthiest, most divinely protected reign in the entire history of Israel. 7 sentences that Solomon, 30 years later, would whisper to his own son, and his own son would throw them away. Within 12 months of Solomon's death, the greatest kingdom in the ancient world was torn in two, permanently. Tonight I am going to show you exactly what those 7 sentences said, why they worked when received and destroyed everything when refused, and what it means that they are still in your Bible, unchanged, waiting for someone willing to receive what Rehoboam refused. But I need you to stay with me, because the story is more specific and more personal than most people know. 1 Kings, chapter 2, verses 2 through 4. David's final speech, delivered from a deathbed in Jerusalem, to the son he had spent his life preparing. He said this, "I am about to go the way of all the earth. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him, and keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go." 7 sentences. 5 of them are instruction. 2 of them are the promise attached to the instruction. You will prosper in all you do, wherever you go. Not in some areas, not in the categories where you perform correctly. In all you do, wherever you go. The promise is total. Now, there is something in Proverbs that most teachers have never fully pointed out, and it changes everything about what this deathbed moment actually was. Turn to Proverbs, chapter 4, verses 3 and 4. Solomon is speaking to his son, 30 years later, passing the instruction forward, building the chain another link. And he writes this, "For I too was a son to my father, still tender and cherished by my mother. Then he taught me, and he said to me," Did you catch what Solomon just did? He opens the transmission not with his own words. He opens it by saying, "I received this. I am about to give you what I was given." And then he quotes David, word for word. "Take hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands, and you will live." Solomon is not writing new wisdom inside Proverbs 4. He is writing a transcript of what David said to him on that deathbed. He is embedding his father's whisper inside the book that was written to last forever. The chain of transmission is written into the chain of transmission. And that is not poetry. That is a man who understood that any individual link in the chain might fail, that a son might refuse, that a generation might reject, and who made sure the words were preserved inside the most widely copied wisdom literature in the ancient world. Solomon knew his son might not listen, so he wrote the whisper where no one could lose it. Now let me show you what the whisper actually contains, because Proverbs 4 is not written the way most people read it. Most people read it as good moral advice, fatherly instruction about character, the kind of thing you might frame on the wall of a study. It is not moral advice, it is a protective system, and the protection described in this chapter is not figurative. Verse 6. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The word translated as protect here, in the original Hebrew, is sha'mar. I need to stop on that word for a moment, because sha'mar appears earlier in Genesis, chapter 3, verse 24. After Adam and Eve are removed from the Garden of Eden, God places something at the east gate. He places cherubim, and alongside them, a flaming sword that turned in every direction, to sha'mar the way to the tree of life, to guard, to keep, to protect with active, watchful, relentless force. The word Solomon uses in Proverbs 4 for how wisdom will protect you is the same word God uses for how angelic guardians protect the gate of Eden. This is not an accident. Solomon chose that word with full knowledge of where it had appeared before. He was telling his son, the protection that wisdom activates around your life is the same category of protection that stands guard at the most sacred threshold in all of creation. Not a gentle covering, not a vague sense of blessing, the guardian force that turns in every direction, that sees everything that approaches, that has never once allowed the wrong thing through. Verse 13. Hold on to instruction. Do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life. For it is your life. Not for it will improve your life. Not for it will give you some advantages. For it is your life. The Hebrew word for life there is chayim, the same word in Genesis for the tree of life that the cherubim with the flaming sword are guarding. Solomon is saying, the instruction David gave me and that I am giving you is not wisdom literature. It is access to the same protection standing guard at the gate of Eden. Receive it and live. This is what Rehoboam was handed, and this is what Rehoboam threw away. 1 Kings, chapter 12. Solomon is dead. He has been dead long enough for the people of Israel to feel the full weight of what his reign had cost them. The labor, the taxation, the forced work camps, the price of empire. And Rehoboam, Solomon's son, is about to be crowned. The elders come to him, men who had served Solomon, men who had watched Solomon operate, men who understood what the Proverbs 4 transmission actually produced in a king who received it. They give Rehoboam advice. Reduce the burden your father placed on the people. Speak kindly. Lead with grace, and they will serve you faithfully for the rest of your reign. These are the men who had been standing next to wisdom for 40 years. Rehoboam asked for 3 days to consider. Then he went to another group. The young men he had grown up with, his own generation, his own age, his own peers. They told him, ignore the elders. Make your people fear you more than they feared your father. Increase the burden. Show strength. And Rehoboam listened to them. He answered the people harshly. He rejected the transmission of the elders. He chose the counsel of men who had never held the whisper. And within months, not years, months, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel revolted. A kingdom 3 generations in the making. 40 years under the most protected, most wisely governed reign in all of human history. Gone. In 12 months. Not because Rehoboam was unintelligent, because he refused to receive. I want you to hold that number. 12 months. David built towards something for decades. Solomon built it for 40 years. One of the wealthiest kingdoms in the ancient world. A military so formidable that every surrounding nation paid tribute rather than test it. Rehoboam undid it in 12 months by refusing to receive what was handed to him. This is what I need you to understand about what the deathbed whisper actually is. It is not just a blessing. It is load-bearing architecture. The protection, the prosperity, the divine favor that Solomon enjoyed. All of it was downstream of that reception on the deathbed in 1 Kings 2. All of it rested on 7 sentences David gave and Solomon received. When Rehoboam refused the chain, he did not merely miss an opportunity. He removed the load-bearing wall, and everything built on top of it came down. Think about every family you have seen do the same thing. A grandfather who carried something real, who tried to pass it forward at the end of his life, who called the children and grandchildren to the bedside, who said the words, who tried, and was politely acknowledged and then ignored for the counsel of peers, of age-mates, of the generation that had never held the weight of covenant. How many curses started not with a witch, but with an unheard whisper from a dying man? There is one more piece of the story that I almost never hear taught. 1 Kings, chapter 11, verses 9 through 12. While Solomon was still alive, God came to Solomon, not after the kingdom split, not as retrospective explanation. While Solomon was still on the throne, while Rehoboam was still a young man, God warned Solomon about what was coming. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord. I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to one of your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David, your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out of the hand of your son. God already knew. God saw into the future and saw Rehoboam standing in front of the elder's wisdom and walking away from it. The split was not punishing Rehoboam for a mistake he had not yet made. It was the consequence God already knew Rehoboam would choose. This is the full weight of that passage. Solomon knew, in the last years of his reign, that he was handing the kingdom to a son who would not receive it. And he wrote Proverbs anyway. He wrote the whisper into a book that would outlast his kingdom, outlast Rehoboam's poor stewardship, outlast the Babylonian exile that would later swallow everything. He wrote it so that every person who came after Rehoboam, every person in every generation since, would have access to what Rehoboam refused, including you, including tonight. Now I need to tell you about the other son, the son who received it. Because the story does not end with Rehoboam. The Kebra Nagast, the Ethiopian book of the glory of kings, is not mythology in the Ethiopian tradition. It is dynastic documentation. The account of Solomon's court includes a detail that the books of Kings barely mention. Solomon had another son. His mother was the Queen of Sheba, who had come to Jerusalem, 1 Kings chapter 10, to test Solomon's wisdom for herself. She had heard of it from every corner of the known world and arrived with a caravan of tribute to verify what she had been told. And the text says this: Solomon answered all her questions. There was nothing too hard for the king to explain to her. She received the transmission, and according to the Kebra Nagast, recorded in detail over 2,000 years of Ethiopian Orthodox institutional memory, when she returned home and gave birth to Solomon's son, and when that son Menelik grew to manhood and traveled to Jerusalem to meet his father, Solomon did not merely acknowledge him. He blessed him. The same transmission, the same chain. David to Solomon, Solomon to Menelik. And when the time came for Menelik to return to Ethiopia, he carried something with him that has not left that land in 2,000 years. The Ark of the Covenant. Ethiopia has maintained this claim uninterrupted for 2 millennia. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has never wavered on it. The Ark is in Axum. It has never left. Think about what this means. Solomon's son in the north rejected the covenant. Solomon's son in the south received it, and the covenant went where it was received. The ark did not go north. It went south. To the son who was willing. To the tradition that was open. The secret that Rehoboam refused, Menelik carried to Africa. The protection that Rehoboam dismantled, Ethiopia has held continuously. This is not coincidence. This is covenant following reception. And I want to stay with this for a moment, For those of you watching from Nigeria, from Ghana, from Ethiopia, from every part of the continent where the Solomonic tradition has been alive without interruption, not as museum history, but as living household practice. Your grandmothers were not maintaining African custom in isolation from the rest of the world's spiritual knowledge. They were the continuation of the chain that Rehoboam broke. The same chain. Traveling south through Menelik, through the Islamic scholars who carried Solomonic manuscripts along the trans-Saharan routes, through the manuscript libraries of Timbuktu, through the women who never permitted the knowledge to lapse, even when they had forgotten its original name. The chain did not break. It moved to the sons and daughters who were willing to receive. I have to tell you something I have not said in any of these videos before. I am telling it now because this particular chain of evidence, David to Solomon to Menelik to Africa, makes it impossible to avoid any longer. I was Rehoboam. My father died when I was 28 years old. I was in my second year at SOAS, deep in my doctoral research. My head was full of manuscripts and dissertation chapters, and the very particular form of self-absorption that belongs to young academics who have just begun to believe that their thinking matters. My father had been ill for several months. We knew he was in the hospital in Enugu. I had flown back twice that year. But there is a way of knowing someone is dying while simultaneously finding reasons to believe there will be another visit, that there will be more time, that the conversation does not need to happen yet. He called me to his room 2 weeks before the end. I sat at the side of the bed. I held his hand. He spoke in Igbo. His Igbo was not the kind you learn in a classroom. It was the kind that carries weight inside its sounds, the kind his father had spoken, and his father's father before that. He said things to me about our family, about what I was carrying, about a protection he was trying to place in my hands before his hands stopped working. I was polite. I said, "Yes, Father." I nodded. I held his hand. I did not write down what he said. I did not ask what he meant by the specific phrases he used. I left the hospital thinking there would be more time, thinking I would come back, thinking that the conversation had been a beginning, not a completion. He died 3 days later. I spent the flight back to London in a kind of grief that is harder to describe than ordinary grief. Not only the grief of losing him, the grief of having been in the room when the chain was being passed forward, and having walked out with empty hands. He called me there. He said the words. He tried. I just did not receive. I was not ambushed. I chose. And I have spent the last 30 years doing what I could to go back through the texts and find what he was trying to say, receiving it through the written chain, the way Solomon made sure it would be available, because Solomon was wise enough to know that a son might not receive in the moment, but that the transmission could be kept alive in the book for the generation who would return to it, for the Rehoboam who eventually understood what he had walked away from, for the son who came back. The transmission was in the texts. It was waiting for me. And it is waiting for you. Proverbs, chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. Solomon speaks again. "Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They are a garland to grace your head, and a chain to adorn your neck." A chain to adorn your neck. The word translated as chain, anak in Hebrew, refers in ancient Near Eastern contexts to an object worn at the throat as protection and identification, not jewelry as decoration, a mark that says, "This person is under a specific authority. This person belongs to a covenant. What your father tried to give you was never just advice. It was a garland and a chain, a covering for the head where decisions are made, a chain around the throat where words are formed." When Rehoboam refused to receive, He walked out of his father's palace without the chain, unprotected. And within a year, the thing that had been holding the kingdom together through the chain was gone. Now I want to give you the protocol for receiving what Rehoboam refused. Solomon's transmission was not only spoken, he wrote it down because he understood that the spoken word can be refused in the moment, but that what you refused once can be received later. The chain is not broken permanently by a single Rehoboam moment. Menelik received the same chain Rehoboam refused. The covenant can be received at any point on the timeline, including now. 4 steps. Step 1. Still your body. Solomon uses the Hebrew word sha'mar at the beginning of Proverbs 4. Listen, receive. The word sha'mar requires stillness. It is the same root as the Shema, Israel's central declaration of faith. Hear, O Israel, Shema Yisrael. It does not mean hear as ambient sound washes over you. It means the specific, deliberate act of positioning yourself to receive. Sit down, upright, still, not reaching for your phone, not running a second mental conversation. Still, Shema requires stillness before it delivers anything. Step 2. Open your hands, palms up. This is the posture of receiving, not grasping. When Solomon blessed Menelik before he returned to Ethiopia, the Kebra Nagast describes Menelik standing before his father with open hands, not demanding, not presenting his own credentials. Open. The posture that says, I have not come to negotiate. I have come to receive whatever you see fit to give. Close the fist, and you can only hold what you already have. Open the palm, and you can receive what you were never able to give yourself. Hold your hands open. Now. Step 3. Speak. Proverbs 4, verse 13 aloud. Use your voice. Your physical voice. Not in your head, not silently. Hold on to instruction. Do not let it go. Guard it well, for it is your life. This is not reciting scripture. This is speaking yourself into the transmission chain. Solomon wrote this verse so that anyone who spoke it after him would be activating the sha'mar, the same category of protection that stands at the gate of Eden. Not by earning it, not by achieving it, but by receiving the instruction that activates it. He made the chain available to everyone who would speak it. Speak it. Once. Aloud. With the full weight of what it is. Step 4. Acknowledge the transmission that was tried. Name one person. A parent, a grandparent, a pastor, an elder who tried to pass something to you. Someone who saw you, who tried to say what they knew, who may or may not have been received. Speak these words aloud. I receive what, speak their name, tried to give me. I am not Rehoboam. I break the refusal. The chain continues through me. Then, the instruction of my father and my mother is a garland and a chain. I wear it now. The sha'mar protection is active. What David gave Solomon, what Solomon encoded for every generation, what has been waiting in this chain for 3,000 years, I receive it. I am the next link. Speak it. Both sides hear it when you do. The covenant is not only a private transaction, it is announced in the air of the room where you speak it. The chain is not broken because Rehoboam refused it. The chain is not broken because the kingdom split in 1 year. The chain is not broken because my father died 3 days after I left the hospital with empty hands. The chain went south when the north refused it. It survived in Ethiopia, in the manuscript traditions, in the grandmothers who carried its practices without knowing its source, in the scholars who preserved the texts when the institutions wanted them suppressed. It survived because Solomon was wise enough to know his son might not receive it, and wise enough to write it down anyway. It has been sitting in Proverbs 4 for 3,000 years. available, unchanged, waiting. You are watching this video, which means somewhere in you, you are not Rehoboam. Rehoboam sat in front of the elders' wisdom, men who had watched the chain operate for 40 years, and walked away to find younger counsel. You are still here, which means you have already made a different choice than Rehoboam made. The chain is available. The only question left is the same question that was asked of every son and every daughter in every generation since David lay dying in Jerusalem and called Solomon to his side. Are you going to receive it, or are you going to be Rehoboam? David whispered it to Solomon. Solomon survived everything because he received it. Solomon whispered it to Proverbs 4. It is still there, still the same words, still carrying the same sha'mar, still waiting. The chain runs from that deathbed in Jerusalem to the room you are sitting in right now. David gave it to Solomon. Solomon gave it to Proverbs. Proverbs gives it to you. The question of Rehoboam is still the only question. Will you receive it? Or will you walk out of the room thinking there will be more time? Sleep well tonight. Or perhaps do not sleep just yet. The chain is in your hands. Whether it continues forward is entirely up to you.